Welcome, everyone. My name is David Carnes. I'm the founder and CEO of OpFocus. Today's webinar, we're going to talk about lessons for your next go-to-market tech stack merge. In the run-up to this event, I shared that the most complicated work that we do as a consulting firm is acquisition integration work. The planning and the execution just requires so much. And today, panelists, we have three amazing leaders who have been through this and will share their ideas and experiences with you. So we have Jennifer Windrow, who's the SVP of Strategic Initiatives at Azara Healthcare. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi.
And we have Anna Lindsay, who's a project manager for revenue operations at Versaterm. Welcome,
Mhm.
Anna. And then last but not least, my longtime colleague, MJ Khan, who's SVP of Technology at OpFocus. Welcome, MJ. All right. So just to share a little bit, we are uh, intending to be hosting webinars each month. We do have an events page on our website where we have registration for upcoming events and we have the recordings for prior events. We also have many recordings of things on the OpFocus YouTube page, just to share that. So to go ahead and get started, I would love to ask Jennifer to give the high-level details of a recent go-to-market tech stack merge that you were involved with.
Sure. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity. As David stated, I'm the SVP of Strategic Initiatives for Azara Healthcare. And just at the highest level, we're a population health management company. And we were built to serve the safety net market in healthcare. And I came to Azara by way of an acquisition of I2I Population Health. I was the COO for I2I for about 9 years leading up to that acquisition by Azara. Um, that happened in early 2025. And I think what was somewhat unique about the merger of Azara and I2I is that we were direct competitors in the population health management realm, both serving the safety net market. And we had been direct competitors and honestly the primary vendors in that space for about 15 years. And so when we came together, the challenge of merging our tech stacks became that we were serving the same markets just in different ways. For example, at I2I, we may have an existing FQHC or federally qualified health center customer that could have been a former customer of Azara or a prospect of Azara or both, and vice versa. Because we occupy about 70% of the safety net market, the databases that we were operating separately prior to the merger were in some ways identical in terms of entities. And so we needed to take HubSpot that Azara had used for about 5 years to manage marketing and sales activities and combine it with an existing Salesforce instance that I2I had leveraged for every function in the organization for 15 years. And so while the entities were all the same, the depth of information and the use case out of those two databases was very different. And so our goals were to create first a consolidated, accurate source of truth for our sales pipeline and reporting. We needed the sales organizations to come together quickly to gain traction in this market we were both in. But then we also needed a source of truth for our existing active customers. We needed one record with a unique identifier that we could all come together around and understand as a combined organization so we could provide the best in class service. And so we stood up a new instance of Salesforce, leveraging both the sales and service clouds, and then began work towards combining these exactly the same but very different databases out of HubSpot and an existing Salesforce instance. So it was a unique challenge, I think, but one that we were successfully able to overcome.
So you had some really interesting aspects to what you just shared.
Mm-hmm.
HubSpot into Salesforce. The Salesforce had been the system of the organization whose name wasn't taken, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, the other thing that's really interesting too, I'd say probably if there are 20 times we have conversations about acquisition integrations, there might be one out of 20 where we'll help stand up a new instance of Salesforce just to sort of leave whatever that tech debt behind, start with a fresh. So kind of an exciting set of circumstances you shared. How about for you, Anna?
The most recent acquisition we finished wasn't as exciting as Jennifer. We were migrating a HubSpot instance into Salesforce and a Maxio instance into Sage Intacct. The challenging part for us was an SLT overhaul that happened in the middle of our merger. So we had a full C-suite shift, and the previous leadership has not planned to touch that new acquisition and begin migrating system until uh 2026. Again, this was they were acquired in Q3 of 25. However, the with the organizational shifts in Q4 of 25, we got strict deadline have completed by the beginning of Q2 of 26. So we had to suddenly restart all of our otherwise um, relaxed discovery sessions and really ramp up the discovery, the tech assessment, and the conversations. Another challenging part was before we ramped up, unfortunately, the last remaining remaining member of the finance team on the company we were acquiring has left, leaving us with no keys to the kingdom and to sort out the data for ourselves. So that was a big challenge. And finally, about 40% of the records that we had to migrate in terms of the deal and opportunity and account information weren't present in HubSpot at all. So we had, on one hand, HubSpot that contained the qualitative data, the deal data, the sales data, and the marketing information. And then we had 40% of just strictly transactional deals and customers that only existed in the invoicing system Maxio. So we had to sort all that out as we were in the process of reviewing those records that weren't previously highlighted in HubSpot, because again, the only people who have been using the financial system have left. We have also uncovered that there was a partner commission component that previously was not discovered, which led to us having to develop a new price book 3 weeks prior to go live date and overhaul all of our revenue detail for those affected opportunities. So that was a doozy, but we have sorted it out, and I think this week we'll tidy up the remaining records at last and call it a day.
Wow. Okay. Exciting. Thank you for sharing that. So you had your own complexities to deal with. Now, MJ, you've done a lot of these, so I guess answer however you want.
I have done a lot of these over the years. It's really interesting. I've worked very closely with both Jennifer and Anna on their respective projects, and it's really interesting to sort of take a step back and hear kind of a retrospective. I'm in the weeds a lot, and I really like hearing that step back and broader view of how things went. The project that I wanted to talk about, though, was not theirs because they could talk about theirs, but rather one that we did at OpFocus a few years ago. We had a client who was acquiring another company. They were both on Salesforce. One had 100 users, the acquired company. The acquiring company had about 300 users. They were both on Salesforce. They both used Sales Cloud. They both used the same analytics software and billing solutions. But then things got very different. The acquiring company used Zuora CPQ. The acquired company used absolutely no CPQ and just did regular standard Salesforce pricing. One used Pardot and Demandbase. The other used HubSpot and 6sense. It was the acquired company using HubSpot and 6sense. And even though we were merging into the acquiring company's org, they wanted to keep HubSpot and 6sense from the company that they acquired and move into those. One of them used Service Cloud for support. The other used Jira, and they decided they wanted to keep both. And they also used different third-party tools for onboarding projects. And they decided they wanted to keep both of them to start. So it was a really interesting combination of what they wanted to merge together and what business functions they wanted to manage separately, at least in an initial go live. Really interesting project, really interesting, and a great solid team, as has been the case with both Jennifer and Anna and their companies. But what made it special for me was the amount of planning and realistic decision making that they did. When we came in to start a planning project, something we call a business solutions design, they already had a statement of, from a business perspective, of what they wanted to accomplish. And it was clear, concise, and realistic, which just guided everything that we did thereafter. So that was really important. They were also very clear about the need to avoid scope creep, to not start implementing new features just because, well, this one will be easy and that one will be easy, so let's do it, but really keep very focused on what the core goals were. And we also had really strong leadership buy-in and participation from both of the organizations. Many years ago, I was part of an acquisition myself. My company that I worked for was acquired, and the merge of the two organizations, this is long before Salesforce, but the merge of the two organizations was led by, managed by, scoped by the acquiring company. And those of us in the company that had been acquired were incidental. And it not only left a bad taste in our mouths, it left us in some ways unable to conduct business. So really important to have participation from both the acquiring and the acquired organizations. And we had that in this case.
A lot of interesting details. It's funny thinking back through the years, how many unusual sets of circumstances. And one that comes to mind was 6 companies. They all had Salesforce, or 5 of the 6 had Salesforce, but then it was 2 Marketo, 2 Pardot, 2 HubSpot, and sort of, so like clearly there are a lot of decisions that need to be made, and sometimes they're not as straightforward, like keeping 2 sets of Jira or 2, that kind of thing. So let's shift gears and talk about planning for these. Anna, how do you suggest preparing for and planning for merging systems like this?
I think the primary task, as are beginning to scope out the project and what is involved, is to find really good experience functional points of contact for each areas that are going to be integrated and migrated, and establishing the limits of their expertise. Because the incorrect assumptions at the early phases of the projects or missing information could lead you astray from some of the critical issues that will impact the go live, and uncovering them earlier on will allow you the extra time to account for any caveats and pivots that are unfortunately inevitable with the majority of the mergers. Another thing is to establish a source of truth system. Again, like in my case, and I assume it's also the case for many other acquisitions where we were missing a large chunk of the data from one of the systems. It was important to establish which system we are going to use as our basis cross-functionally across all teams and systems and platforms. And then we will all agree on it. We'll clean it up together. And during the synergistic part of the process is a good time to uncover any issues or discrepancies. And then again, you have time to pivot and adjust and to clean up the data more, versus having everybody do their own thing on their own platform of expertise. And this way you also can then have the critical people at the critical points of the process during the key phases of it. You start working together, you ensure that you're on the same page, that you're looking at the same data, you're evaluating the customer base in the same way, and then you can streamline and have meetings regarding just specific invoicing or legal contractual platforms or any technical integrations.
Great. How about for you, MJ?
I love a lot of what Anna, well, I love everything that she said, but I absolutely, she stole my thunder in a few areas.
Sorry.
That's okay. One of the big things for me going into an org merge is realizing that while I tend to come at things from a technical perspective, it's not just about merging organizations or merging systems. It's about business process transformation. And that before you get into the depth and the details of what are the individual systems that we need to merge, we need to understand where the business wants to go. What should be the end result of this, not in the immediate aftermath of a merge, but also in the months and maybe in some cases years that follow that. So looking at it initially as a business transformation and how you're going to accomplish that and what accomplishing that means is really important. I mentioned before having a strong statement of goals, some guidelines that guide what it is you're going to be doing and what it is you're going to avoid doing during the process. As Anna said, having a really knowledgeable team that represents a breadth of the business is really, really crucial. We need to do an in-depth review of people, process, systems, and data, and do that in a very organized manner before we start making changes. We have a project that we call at OpFocus a business solution design, in which we produce, after a whole series of interviews across all of the business functions and all of the companies involved, we produce a more technical document saying what that merge is going to look like, how it's going to be accomplished, what it will look like, what it won't look like when it's done. But it starts at the business level and discussing with business stakeholders. I think having that level of planning up front before you get into the very, very tempting aspects of let's get in and start looking at automations in the system gets to be really important. It also helps us avoid the situation that Anna described earlier, where you're 3 weeks from deployment and suddenly someone had the thought, wait a minute, we've got partners that we need to work with. And how are we going to do that? So it really does help you make sure that you've got the full breadth of the business transformation in mind. Those are the key things for me, David.
Thank you, MJ. How about for you, Jennifer?
Well, we did it backwards. We came in hot with less of a plan. Our circumstance had a sense of urgency behind it that required us to have a really narrow scope to start, against better judgment from the OpFocus team. But nonetheless, your circumstances are your circumstances, and we adapt accordingly. And so we came into this merge really aggressively with some three. Well, I only mentioned 2 goals before. There was really a third as I delve into it, but just concise goals. We need the sales team operating from one source of truth. We need to know who our customers are, and we do not need to disrupt processes for any other department. That was the third goal, which is tell finance what they need to know, tell delivery solutions what they need to know in the way that they need to know it, while you're creating this new instance for the sales team. And so I think had all things been ideal and we had the opportunity, the better approach is to plan, go through the business solution design, then implement. We did it backwards. We stood up and launched our instance for the sales team initially, and now we're going back to do the business solution design. We actually wrapped that up at the end of last year, in the midst of implementing some of those features more broadly across the organization. I think you can do it. We're evidence that you can do it either way. I do think that having that methodical approach in the beginning, if you have the opportunity to start with a business solution design, that would be a preferred path, so that you have that thorough planning and documentation. But I do think we were an example of being able to be successful in a slightly different way because our circumstances required us to act with a sense of urgency that necessitated a siloed launch.
Yeah, that's great. We've been calling that business solution design for acquisition integrations. We've been calling them acquisition integration blueprints. Mm-hmm. And the idea being that, we don't want to scare people off, but we do want to try to get everybody who needs to make a decision in the room and share information and try to get them in the room. I'm just throwing that into the chat, some information about how that works for us, an acquisition integration blueprint project. And I'm sure we're going to talk more about that stuff. Let's actually keep going. I'm really curious who should be on the project team. So maybe MJ, maybe you could start us off. Who from the who from the company should be on the project team to make this successful?
Happy to talk about that, but can I take a minute to follow up on something that Jennifer just said?
Oh, good. Yeah.
So Zara did approach their merge in a little bit of a different, I don't want to say backwards, but a little bit of a different way than we would typically recommend it. But the thing that made them successful was that they were very thoughtful about it. I had a client relatively recently who will not hear and will remain nameless that basically said, we're going to merge sales together and we'll worry about the rest of the organization later. And it was almost that blatant in what they were saying. And it is just totally unrealistic to approach a merge like that because sales doesn't work in a vacuum. Sales sells, and then, gee, finance has to bill and onboarding has to onboard and support has to support. And if they don't have ready access to the information that resulted from sales, that's not going to work too well. We worked with them, and I think they changed their approach a bit. But the thing that made Azara's approach successful in deferring the business solution design, the acquisition blueprint, sorry, I'm old school, and made it successful for them to focus on sales is that they didn't ignore the rest of the organization. We may not have transformed those aspects of the business, but we made sure that they were supported based on what sales was going through.
So all right, MJ, who should be on the team?
Who should be on the team? Okay, yeah. All right, so lots of teams. First, executive sponsors. We need people who can make decisions about the goals of the business, their vision about the end result in the short term and over time, who can tell us things like, how do we measure success? How do we know we've been successful? What business processes do we want to focus on? What do we want to keep? What do we want to retire? So that's C-suite people, that's sales leadership, customer success, marketing, finance leadership, and also IT and operations leadership. So executive sponsors for sure, but we also need subject matter experts. The execs know how to measure and monitor the business, but they don't necessarily know what happens within the business when the rubber meets the road. So we need subject matter experts. And typically we'll lean really heavily on an operations team for that. So RevOps, sales ops, marketing ops, customer success ops, finance operations. We need people who understand the details of how the business works, how the systems work, what the data is that we need. As we get closer to actually doing the org merge, we need more hands-on technical team members. We need data migration specialists. And I'm sure we'll talk more about data. We've already, Jennifer and Anna have both mentioned source of truth is really important. But how do we take what is potentially very disparate data and turn it into a single, consistent, solid, working database? And that takes a team of specialists to do that well. We also need admins and integration experts in each of the systems that are going to be affected, both how do we put them together and in some cases, how do we take them apart? We'll very often need developers and that level of admins as well. And sometimes security specialists, change management specialists, a lot of people like that. And I'll do two more. One, QA and UAT is a key part of this. We don't just go live. We have to make sure everything works the way we expect. And that can take a lot of effort. And we need a team, not just from us who are doing a lot of the hands-on work, but also from our clients who need to verify that things work the way they expect. And last but not least is a really strong project manager and project owner. And that's something that we've had, especially, not to suck up too much, but working with both Jennifer and Anna. They're both extremely knowledgeable. They're able to make decisions or to go to the people who can make decisions. And they work very, very cooperatively with the OpFocus project managers and the OpFocus teams. And we need all of that in order for this kind of project to be successful.
How about for you, Jennifer?
Yeah, so I served as the executive sponsor, and part of what I brought to the table was a decade of experience using Salesforce and understanding how it worked, how it could work for the organization. What I didn't bring was expertise on Azara's workflows and processes and really even players. You know, I was fairly new to the organization when this came to fruition. But I think as the executive sponsor, I had the commitment of my peers at the executive and senior level to contribute when I needed them to contribute. And so I think, having that executive sponsor who has the support and cooperation of the rest of the senior team is critical. It was critical to our success. I had a dedicated project manager from day one. I can say in full confidence I could not have done it without him. He was a seasoned project manager. He knows how to lead and manage milestones, tasks, people, all of those things. I think that I don't know how I would have been successful without that. The admin experience, we had a resource on our team that had some Salesforce admin experience, and that was important to this because he was able to help us in a lot of ways. Then, because we were two relatively small organizations coming together, we're still in the circumstance where some people wear a lot of hats. And so we try to identify at various levels from frontline up to senior who knew, right? I can tell you at a high level how things work, but I don't know fingers on keyboards how the frontline folks are actually doing things. You have to have those people at the table because they're the ones that'll tell you how it really works. But having that representation both to contribute business requirements and then to MJ's point, be those QA and UAT testers. They're going to be the ones that are using the system. They're going to be the ones expected to honor the workflow. So having their contributions at the front end and then on the back end for QA and UAT, I think also critical.
How about for you, Anna?
I'm going to piggyback both from MJ's and Jennifer's points. So I was actually promoted into the project management role during the last merger we did because the team did determine that we need somebody to oversee all of the moving parts holistically. And again, somebody who's doing the work. I think there was a lot of work to be done. You do need somebody who can see everything from this holistic perspective and keep track of all the different things because, again, none of the systems exist in a silo. And then to Jennifer's point about the specialists, I do fully agree. A lot of the times you have generalists, especially in the smaller companies, that know a little bit of everything. And while they tend to have less cooks in the kitchen and just have this person, well, they know a little bit of everything and how everything works. So you should just use them as the POC for those areas. Unless they have been in the role recently enough where their knowledge is still relevant as to the day-to-day operations of this team, you will still need somebody on the specialist team to QA and to test and review the separate functions. Because again, the generalists are great and it's very important to involve them earlier in the process so you understand how the entire system works and how it functions together. And then once you are ready to put pen to paper, you can present it to the specialist and have them test and be like, is this reflective of your experience? Because for us, for example, we had the default generalist on the company that we acquired, Steam. And he knew quite a bit, and he was a great resource when we were determining the original tech stack and we were assessing the new operations and processes that we need to establish. However, when it came to the field and automation and flow level of the day-to-day minutia of the operations team, his knowledge just wasn't sufficient, and we didn't end up missing some things just because we did not have that specialist expertise. Another thing is going back a little bit to MJ's earlier point, as a member of the team being acquired, involving people earlier and having them be a part of the design process really helps with change management. People advocate more passionately for things they have been directly involved in. Having them be a part of the Q&A and the UAT, I always recommend involve less people from the acquiring team and quote more people from the acquired team because again they're the ones whose entire job is changing and they don't know what it is and it's stressful and it's hard to get adjusted to it, so involve them and it does great things for morale.
Fantastic. I'd like to shift gears to talk about predictors for success for these merge projects. Perhaps Jennifer, you could start us off.
Sure. I think going back to executive approval, support, and articulation of the goals. When you're merging two organizations, to Anna's point, you've got the acquiring group who, in most circumstances, their workflows, their products, their, the acquired folks are going to need to adapt, but they're adapting to a lot of new things, and not the least of which is what's the culture of this organization? How does it work? And so I think having consistent messaging at the executive level that says, "Hey guys, we're doing this. This is why we're doing this. We're doing this together," is critical. Like that is probably one of the most important things, because you want the resources to show up and have a vested interest and buy-in into what they're doing. And again, to Anna's point, if you're one of the acquired resources, this almost immediately gives you a place where you can contribute and have confidence and bring value. And it matters to people. And so I think having a voice at the top of the organization that says we are coming together and this is how we're going to do it and these are our goals, is probably the biggest predictor of success, in my opinion.
And so that we were really lucky that you were so involved in that project. I mean, just it's not always the case.
Yeah, and I think, my leader was, he understood the importance. He didn't take for granted that this was a growth merger, and in order for us to gain traction immediately with this wealth of resources in this market that we were all in, we had to have a consolidated system. And he knew and understood the importance. It wasn't just another project. It was the project to set us up for success in a growth merger. And I appreciated his support and his voice in it as well.
How about for you, Anna?
Yeah, no, definitely echo Jennifer's opinion on the executive sponsorship. Again, this is why I mentioned the SLT team switch over at the beginning of our merger was really stressful. But again, at the same time, it also was very beneficial because the availability of certain critical subject matter experts that we needed access to was very difficult to procure. And this is also why I was promoted to a manager role, just to have that. Again, emails and titles matter in some companies. Just to get in a room with some people, it's like, hey, do you want to have your things in order when you migrate? Then you probably dedicate some time for us. So I think the general availability of the resources from the acquired team is a good indicator of success. If you're unable to get it, perhaps you do need to have that executive buy-in and somebody to go out in front of them and say, hey, this is happening. Please participate in this project. We want to make sure that this is good for you, that you can function, that you can contribute, and we can have a successful initiative that everybody benefits from. Another thing is trying to get access to as many systems and platforms as possible as early as you can. Being able to plan out and review data sets and establish that, again, source of truth early on will definitely be greatly beneficial and prevent any of the last minute changes and caveats and pivots.
Yeah, I've always thought of that as like burping a baby. You've got the baby up here and hey, yep, we have HubSpot, and oh, we have 6sense, and oh, we have this other thing, and oh, we have this.
Yeah. That's exactly what happened.
Anyway, how about for you, MJ? Predictors of success.
David, I'm sorry. I just have the vision of you burping the baby, and then all of a sudden the baby throws up all over your back.
Yeah.
Hopefully that doesn't happen on the project.
I'm sure that happens.
I'm sure that happens. I tend to get involved in these projects earlier on than most people expect because I work very closely with the OpFocus sales team. So even before we've engaged with a company to actually do the project, I'm very often talking with people from both of the organizations or multiple organizations that are being merged. And you pick up on some things that can be predictors of success. One of them it's a potential issue with any kind of project that we do, but it's especially prone to this in org mergers, and that's politics. And if I can walk into even sales calls and realize that there's a minimum of politics, as very fortunately has been the case with both Azara and Versaterm, to realize that there's not sniping among the management teams, people aren't putting other people down, there's not that undercurrent of politics, then that bodes really well for success. Among other things, it means we can establish a really good relationship with the client. And if we have that relationship and that level, the client has confidence in us, we have confidence in them, then we can have the hard discussions without having to worry about political ramifications from that. So minimum of politics and really solid relationship throughout, but especially at the very beginning of the engagement, can be a really good predictor of success. Going from something like that, that's kind of, esoteric and people and fuzzy oriented, to something very hardcore at the other end of the spectrum, during the sales process, we'll ask, do you have a full Salesforce sandbox? Because we're going to be merging data and we need a full representation of the data to merge into. Unfortunately, Jennifer, not everybody has a full sandbox, but that can be a predictor of our ability to really merge data together, if we have that full representation of at least one organization sandbox. Also, having sandboxes in any of the other systems that support them will make building and testing and migration so much easier.
Yeah, that's a good point. I grew up moving a lot, and every time you move, you sort of take stuff out of the attic, take stuff out of the basement. I just heard this mantra of, all right, you need to get rid of a third every time you move. And, after a number of moves, we literally had nothing in the attic and nothing in the basement anymore. So, it's interesting thinking this really important question. I feel like this is like the question of the webinar, regarding what do you keep, right? So you've got these systems, they have all this stuff in it, and they also have tech debt, right, as part of this. But so how do you determine what systems, data, process, reporting to keep, what integrations, all these surrounding systems? Perhaps Anna, you could start us off with that.
Yeah. Unless, you like, I guess both of the examples that both MJ and Jennifer provided, where we either have kept multiple systems at the same time or just created a fully new instance of Salesforce. I don't know if the majority of the mergers and acquisitions would fall into the same bucket. I think for most companies, it's clear that there's an acquiring company and acquired company, and usually the expectation needs to be set with the team being acquired fairly early on that their processes and their systems are to be added onto versus replacing the original acquiring corporation systems. And while it's a tough expectation to set and it will likely cause some discontent, I actually think if you raise this early enough and you are very sort of stalwart and adamant about this expectation, the agitation could actually be very beneficial to the process, because it will show you what do people deem crucial, what do they care about enough to be vocal about it in front of other people. And this is exactly the kind of feedback that you're looking for. This is where you document all of their concerns. You have dedicated sessions. Again, I recommend starting with the generalist first to get that sort of holistic view across all systems and processes. And then you set up dedicated sessions with the specialist where your teams would be able to delineate, okay, what processes can be added onto the existing system without disrupting the flows, what can be adjusted and modified, and in cases where this is just not how we do things here, and we are going to have to retire it, because again, the why is very important. If there is no solid why and there is no way to incorporate into your existing system, have plenty of documentation, have a Q&A sessions, have UAT, even if they're testing something very minute, like you have renamed a field, having people be involved in the design really helps the change management later on. It reduces non-compliance rate, it reduces error rate, it helps them be more involved, and that also helps them meet people across the organization, because oftentimes, especially with remote work, they just live in their little bubble and they have the same people that as they've been chatting for now in a different instance of Slack, but they don't really meet people from the organization that has acquired them unless there's sort of a forceful sales team operation merge. So I would say establish the expectation. This is what we're keeping. This is what we're leaving behind. Have them come to you with their concerns, document them, determine why it isn't important, and see how you can accommodate. And if you can't, let them help you accommodate.
Great. How about for you, MJ?
Agree with everything that Anna said. The org merge project that I talked about earlier was really interesting from a process consolidation perspective because the acquired company had a relatively small number of very long lasting deals and high dollar value deals. And the company that was acquiring them had a lot of low dollar volume, very quick moving deals. They made the decision to move to a single sales process, which gets really kind of interesting is how do you merge those together, but you do it by carefully defining what each of the stages need and how qualification works depending on what you're selling. But they made that determination. They wanted one sales process, and then everything else sort of followed from there. A couple of other things to think about beyond just the suitability for the business needs. One is availability. If you want to move into a new Salesforce org and you want Salesforce CPQ, those are incompatible goals. You can't get Salesforce CPQ in a new Salesforce org or an org where it hasn't already been installed. So you've got to think about availability of the products that you want to move to or keep in conjunction with your goals. And another issue that I've seen recently is basically cultural factors. Worked with a client recently, Anna, who decided that one of the goals that was really important to them was to minimize the number of platforms that they were working on. They wanted to basically, if Salesforce was going to meet basic needs, then they wanted to use the Salesforce product rather than using a third-party product that might involve an integration. I call it cultural. It's actually important from a technical perspective too, but that's another factor that goes into the decision-making process about what do you keep and what do you not.
Okay. Thank you, MJ. How about for you, Jennifer?
Yeah, I think because we kind of came in hot backwards on our project and having really succinct goals led us at a big picture at the highest level down the path of what to keep. But, I think what the project forces you to do that's critical is everyone seems to know the what. We know what finance needs to know. We know what delivery needs to know. We know what support needs to know. And everyone kind of has a general understanding at a certain level. What folks tend to not know is why. And so the process of identifying the why this department needs this information begins to form the story of what to keep. And a lot of times in rapidly growing organizations, you bypass the documentation of the why because you're too busy doing the what's. And this initiative, even though we came about it in a different way, it puts you at the table to say, okay, Mr. Finance Team, I understand you need this, this, and this, but what are you using it for? Why do you need it? And that started to inform what you keep, right? At I2I, I said for the full decade I was there, the most wonderful part of our business was that we used this Salesforce instance to document everything that ever happened with every customer for all of time. And the curse was that we kept every documentation of everything that ever happened for every customer for the duration. Yeah. And so it was almost too much to navigate. And so understanding why your business teams need certain information is critical in defining what it is you keep. And I just think I don't want to gloss over that part of it because I think that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I want to shift again and talk about lessons learned. We've got a nice group attending today. Want to share as many lessons with them and with anyone watching the video later on. So perhaps MJ, you could start sharing some lessons learned with us.
Sure. I can certainly talk about it across the breadth of projects that I've worked on. I'm really eager to hear what Jennifer and Anna have to say as well. But for me, one of the biggest lessons learned kind of goes back to one of the topics we talked about earlier, which is that it's not just a technical project, it's a business transformation project. And you really, if you want to be successful about it, you really have to think about it that way as you start. Um, the most successful projects are the ones that define realistic goals first. I mentioned earlier, it's the difference between ready, aim, fire and ready, fire, aim. The company that I mentioned earlier that was like, we're going to consolidate sales and we'll worry about everything else later. That's ready, fire, aim. And it's just not going to be successful. You don't have to plan how to do absolutely everything to start, but you do have to be able to accommodate the rest of the business so that they can stay in business and move along with you as you're migrating the organizations together. Um, One of the last lessons is one that we haven't really talked about much, but it's that data is absolutely key. Understanding the data from the organizations that you're bringing together, not just at the row level of, gee, do you have two accounts that need to be merged, but also at the field level. Gee, do you talk about account segments and account types and opportunity types and things like that? Do you talk about them in the same way? And if you don't, how do you transform the data? Is the data in each individual organization clean? And if it's not, how do you manage that before you start to bring them together? So a really big lesson is to focus on the data amongst everything else that you're focusing on to make sure that what you end up with is data that's going to support the business.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, MJ. All right, lessons learned. Jennifer.
I think one of my biggest lessons learned is to be diligent in times of fatigue. Um, so I think that when you broach these merges, there's a lot of necessary discovery that has to happen. And there's a lot of people that you have to bring to the table to talk through lots of minutia. Um, and it can be easy and comfortable to default to those general fielders in moments of fatigue. And I think we found ourselves doing that. I think we found ourselves doing that in Discovery. I think, in full transparency, we found ourselves doing that in UAT. And we found circumstances where we had chosen to lean into that fatigue and trust the general fielders instead of digging a little further, um, and realizing we hadn't gotten it just exactly right. And so I think the biggest lesson is, you've got to forge ahead even in those moments of fatigue, and continue to bring the right people to the table, even when it's tempting to just lean on the folks that are already there and that are comfortable.
And the reality is everybody has a day job,
Yeah.
right? So that's part
Yeah.
of where the fatigue comes from
Yeah.
when these projects are not short projects
Right.
as well. Thank you, Jennifer. How about for you, Anna?
We actually acquired another company in the middle of our previous acquisition. So we have the wonderful opportunity to apply our lessons directly immediately after, which is great. It reinforces learning. But yeah, to echo Jennifer's point with the decision fatigue, this is why having a project manager is super important. And if you are in a company that has very aggressive growth. Again, I've been at Versaterm for almost 3 years. In this span, we have acquired 4 companies, which is fairly aggressive. Have somebody whose day job it is to ensure that all the ducks are in a row, who is focused on ensuring that your data is correct. To me, I think the biggest lesson that we are currently applying with our newest integration is having decisions made as early as possible on as many topics as you possibly can that you are aware of. So again, deciding what is the source of truth. Um, having the operational decisions that pertain to sales, like territory, teams, account ownership, compensation structure, decided before we even hold the data, so we don't have to go back and switch out the teams because we decided to have them separately, actually. Um, decide we are basing our entire data architecture holistically with the finance team, with our contractual team. So we are viewing the customer hierarchy the same way, and we don't have to, compensate for oversights because the one team has interpreted the data differently. We are deciding early on everything together. We're bringing in the SMEs from the from the company we are acquiring very early on. They're helping us with the design. We're ensuring that they're okay with it. We're having them do UAT even before we load the actual data. We are showing them around Salesforce versus leaving it until the week prior to go. And it's like, oh yeah, by the way, this will start Monday, in order to expose them to our processes and have them weigh in on how that would be best incorporated into their existing system. And I guess we'll see how that pans out. Our go live is in a month, so I'll keep you
Wow.
updated.
Wow. Okay. So no rest for the weary.
No.
I am so appreciative of all three of you. Such great experiences and ideas that you've shared. We do have a question. So thank you, Michael, for posing the question. Any tools have you used for profiling the data? Staying clean with MDM is a longer term strategy. Are there any surgical tools you've used to help with getting clean first, then moving and consolidating? So thank you, Michael, for the question. Curious if anyone has. I think
Our
we did.
surgical tool was OpFocus. We used
I was
Ganesh and
going to
Josh.
say the same thing.
I was going to say too. Yeah.
I mean, but we did. In full transparency, we leaned on resources at OpFocus to help us analyze and have clarity on what these databases included. We have, around 1,000 customers. At the beginning, we had 22,000 account records to deal with. Well, we needed help in understanding what they were, how they were the same, how they were different, so we could begin to apply logic to them to merge records or, do away with them. And so I would lean on MJ for a more technical answer to that as well.
I would go back to OpFocus as well. We have a data team, and I'm trying to be somewhat modest about our capabilities, but I really can't be, because it's really a phenomenal team within OpFocus that has awesome tools, many of which they've built themselves, and many external tools, enrichment tools, Dun & Bradstreet, for example, that we rely on, or they rely on, for a variety of purposes. But working with a team of people who have a very detailed understanding of data, who are incredibly nitpicky, detail-oriented people, to spend an hour talking about a set of pick list values, to really look at that data, you need people with the experience to do that. It's very hard to do it in a reliable way on your own. There are definitely a plethora of enrichment tools out there that can be really helpful. Systems like D&B can be really helpful, especially in things like putting accounts into an appropriate account hierarchy. For clients who are in very specialized spaces, as both Azara and Versaterm are, there are industry-specific enrichment platforms that we can rely on to help cleanse the data. So I can't give you a specific one other than the OpFocus data team and the magic that team does.
Yeah, and master data management, it makes me think we should do a whole session on that, just getting the data right when, and I know a little bit about Michael's situation, who's asking the question, and just how many ERPs are in play in that environment, and multiple Salesforce orgs, and just interesting foundational situation to think about. How do you apply a master data management strategy, and within that, I feel like we just
and it can be an iterative process, right? Like, I think that there has to be a level of appreciation for an iterative approach. So we started really conservative because we didn't want to lose any of those critical records, and so you start with a view of it that's conservative enough, that's safe to begin to whittle that down. But we went through several iterations of merging records, identifying records, to get to a place where we're now comfortable that we've reached the goal of having one uniquely identified record for account. But it took us probably 3 or 4 formal iterations of it to get to that place. And I think you have to kind of start with that expectation.
And it's a never-ending process.
Yeah.
It's not a Marie Kondo once and you're done. You have to keep it. All you have to do is look at the background of my office to realize the importance of staying on top of things.
I was thinking about that in David's analogy of moving. I thought, man, I've been in my house for a long time. Maybe that's why I have so much stuff. I haven't moved.
That's exactly it.
So again, thank you so much, Anna, Jennifer, and MJ, for sharing your ideas and experiences with everyone. Just as a quick reminder, we will be hosting webinars each month. Our next one is August 12th on how to fix your go-to-market foundations so that you can get on to the good stuff. So anyway, look forward to seeing everyone back for that. Again, thank you so much, Anna, Jennifer, and MJ, for sharing so much today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye, guys.